All right, we are live. Welcome to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Darren Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. And with us is an old friend of ours, Frank Kane from Sundog Software. How's it going, Frank?
Going well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We were just talking about the new Picard series, geeking out over some Star Trek stuff. But before we go ahead and get started with our episode, I guess two quick things. One, Alessandro Negro was supposed to join us today, but he had something come up, so he couldn't hop on. But I do want to give his book a shout out. So let's see. In the description of this episode, you can find a link for a 40% discount on his book, Graph-Powered Machine Learning, which I haven't had a chance to dive into, but it sounded really cool. So definitely make sure to check that out. And let's go ahead and get through the housekeeping here. First things first, Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. You can visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com and sign up for the Country Store giveaway on our Facebook page. So the winner this week of our Country Store giveaway is Todd S. from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Oh my gosh, that's my neck of the woods. So Todd S., you got a Country Store hat heading your way along with copies of our ebooks. Anyone who didn't win this week can hop on our Facebook page and sign up for the giveaway. And while you're on our Facebook page, go ahead and answer our question of the week, which this past week was, are you afraid of an AI takeover a la iRobot? Frank, what's your thoughts on that?
If I could live to be 200 years old, then I would worry about it, but not worried about it in my lifetime.
Do you think we got time? There was a split. There was actually a pretty even split between, and I did sort of like a little spot check of the voters, and it seems like the techie side of our techies and non-techies alike wasn't scared of an AI takeover. The non-techie side seemed to be a little more hesitant about saying they're not scared of robots taking over the world.
I still think our prediction and our sci-fi scenario is much more immediate and appropriate, which Frank doesn't know about, but Darren and I have a theory that the machine takeover has already begun in the form of a sentient internet, and it is actively causing us to have all this discord and disharmony that we're experiencing in society today. It's purposeful, it's intentful, and it's the beginning then for humanity.
Yeah, that's my take on it too. Like when you get into the ethics of AI, which is what this is all about, people are already harnessing this power for nefarious means at very large scale. And that's the immediate threat. It's not, Terminators marching against us with machine guns. It's, people taking control of society, really.
That's what everyone says until Skynet happens. But that is the topic of the day. But before we hop into that, I guess the question of the week next week, because our topic next week is sustainability. So I was just curious whether people have solar panels on their home, because I was actually thinking of installing some, since we get an insane amount of sun here in Las Vegas.
And I don't know now. I don't know if you can still get subsidized for them. But you know what, people, and they obviously here in Florida, they use them a lot. But it's so funny. It takes a massive amount of them, which is fine. But the main use for them here in Florida is to heat your pool.
Is it really?
Yeah, like they use it to heat the pools in Florida. That's the main use for it. And it's like that.
I'm guilty.
Okay. Yeah.
Sustainability angle, I guess we're going for.
Yeah, I was gonna do it when I put my pool in and decided against it. But yeah. Yep.
The pool doesn't get naturally heated just from the massive amounts of sunlight? Like the off-season pool heating you're talking about?
Where I am here, yeah, exactly. You won't go in the pool from like early November until late February. So there is a time period where it's a little bit chilly to go in, but there is a time period there.
Oh, what a world we live in. It's a little bit chilly to go in your pool, so let's install solar panels to heat it year-round. The other thing I want to talk about, Frank, we actually have an episode with you about your book about Elasticsearch and Elasticstack, which is really cool. Everyone should check that one out. I think it's still the highlighted video on our newsletter. So anyone who gets the newsletter can check it out from there, or just hop on our YouTube page. But you also have another book called The Ultimate Introduction to Big Data. Can you tell us a little bit about that book and sort of what that covers?
Yeah, I released an introduction to the whole big data ecosystem out there that includes Hadoop and Apache Spark and stuff like that. So, breaking it down for a more non-technical audience, it's just the technology tools that are used to analyze and process data at massive scale. So anyone that's dealing with like huge amounts of information, like an Amazon or a Google, and to tie it into this episode a little bit, if you want to massage that data before you feed it into an AI, those are the tools you would need to do it.
And so it is sort of
very cool.
Is it hands-on or is it more informational?
Oh yeah, it's both. I mean, for every technology we introduce, and there's like 25 or 26 of them covered in the course, there's a hands-on activity included with that and hands-on exercises. So you really get to dive in and play with an actual instance of Hortonworks HDP on your own PC and get some hands-on practice with it.
Cool. But you don't need to necessarily be a technical expert to sort of get some value out of the course.
No, definitely not. I mean, I definitely encourage, anyone who wants to be conversant in technology to at least, watch the first few lectures, get an idea of what it's all about, what the technologies are, what the names mean, and how they fit together. And you don't have to be like an engineer or a programmer to get to that level. Very
cool. So there's also a 40% discount code in our description for that video series as well. Actually, all of your stuff, Frank. And we're going to be doing a giveaway for a free copy of that across our social media platforms. So everyone keep an eye out for that. But I guess it's probably a good lead into today's episode because so much of AI is contingent upon just the massive amount of data that's out there. We talked actually a little bit last week about the algorithmic side of big data and sort of the ethical quandaries that come up when you're talking about algorithms making decisions that affect human lives. Maybe a place to jump in here in terms of AI itself and maybe its effect on human lives. This is a story that I'm sure you guys remember, but I'm trying to remember the name of the company, but there was an automated car that ran over a cyclist in Arizona. Do you guys remember what the name of that company was?
Wasn't that Uber?
Was it Uber?
I thought it was.
I really should have had this handy.
Yeah, we should probably look it up before we malign some innocent company.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's not right.
Yes.
Anyways, I'll look that up.
Yeah.
It was Uber.
Yes, it was Uber. Yes.
Okay, so let's malign Uber.
But
But
they're not alone. I mean,
I guess the issue is as we sort of give more and more of our lives over to this, maybe touches on automation, but definitely more and more of our lives over to AI and sort of machine decisions. Like, where does the responsibility lie, Frank? Where does the sort of the if something goes awry, where does the buck fall?
Yeah, I mean, today it's still pretty clear, like the owner of the technology is still liable, right? I mean, I own a Tesla, which has, quote unquote, self-driving capabilities. And I know that thing is like a death trap in its current form. So if I turn that thing on and like something bad happens, it's on me for turning it on and not disabling it soon enough. So at least today, the onus is still on the operator, on the person who actually owns the vehicle. If a cop were to cite me for running someone over in my Tesla while autopilot was on, I'm the one who would get a ticket, right?
Right. What's interesting too with the Arizona case, and I think it's maybe unspoken that even if a human had been driving that car, I'm not sure that they would have been able to avoid the woman because she really just came out of nowhere in the middle of the night.
Yeah. And, that's always Tesla's defense when something happens with one of their cars. They're saying, well, yeah, I mean, people get killed in our cars, but people get killed in all cars. And if you were to compare the rates between autonomous vehicles and non-autonomous, it's not clear who would win, actually.
I guess
what's interesting,
go ahead,
though, is when, because you said, I think I might be on a little bit of a lag here, but that's why you guys are kind of hearing me late. But I think that what's interesting, though, is and again, Frank, there's a term for this, and I can't remember what it is. But when people start learning how to trick AI, meaning like this is a contrived example, but when somebody like goes and like holds a stop sign up on the side of a freeway, and it causes a massive car accident because the AI saw a stop sign, so slammed on the brakes, kind of thing. Yeah. So at that juncture, who becomes liable at that juncture? When the software is actually the cause of the accident. It's going to be
Mhm.
interesting when that starts happening.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure it's already happening. I mean, you could paint a line across the road, and like my Tesla would say, "Oh my God, I have to stop!" Right? And,
Right.
And I think is that there was another fatal accident involving Tesla's self-driving capability in California, and I think that was the actual issue, was that there was an old lane line that hadn't been painted over properly, where the road kind of divided, and then there was like a median, and there was still sort of a remnant of the lane line, and the car didn't know what to do, and it just plowed into the median basically at full speed. What's interesting to me is that as our reliance on AI grows, like maybe the cyclist wouldn't have been hit if the driver had been more alert, but the technology itself is built in such a way that it encourages you not to be alert. So how do we, is there a way to sort of mitigate the loss of human functionality as these AI systems become more and more implemented?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at self-driving cars today, they do require you to maintain attention, and the different manufacturers have different ways of doing this. For example, on Tesla, they have a torque sensor on the steering wheel, and if they sense that you're not actually holding onto the steering wheel, it will go nuts on you and say, pay attention, dude, or something bad could happen. Other ones actually have cameras that are looking at you and say, are you actually awake? Are you paying attention? Are you looking forward? So today they have systems in place to make sure that there is a human being there paying attention who can take over when something bad starts to happen.
That's where you
But
just
like you
get those
said,
novelty glasses where it has the open eyes, and you just put those
oh, I'm
on
sure
and
people
then
are doing
lean back.
crazy stuff. I've heard of people actually like placing an orange on the steering wheel to trick out the Tesla sensor. No joke.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and it's all very interesting, because this is what I always go back to. Like, if everything were done by machines, we wouldn't have a problem. Meaning, if every car was autonomous and every road was built by machines, like, we'd have this perfectly efficient transportation system. But the minute you throw in a human element, it becomes dangerous. And it's funny, because the machines came second, but it's really the humans that aren't good at like maintaining a process. You know what I mean? Like, if everyone used the left lane to pass, everything would be so much more efficient. But the minute someone go slow in that left lane, everything is thrown off. So it's just funny to think about the fact that, yes, machines are adding danger and software is adding danger. Yet if everything were done by machines and software, we'd be giving up like all of our control, but things would run a lot more smoothly.
Oh yeah, I mean, driving should just be a mechanical operation, right? But it isn't, because there's crazy drivers out there doing unpredictable things. Lane markings are crazy in construction zones. It's all that human-induced variability that throws a monkey wrench in it all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly you guys haven't seen iRobot recently, because one of the
It's been a
major
few
plot
years.
points in Act 2 was his inability to escape his car as robots attack.
Right. That's right.
So, you guys are just inviting you guys are just inviting our overthrow by our robot overlords. There was a great quote I came across, though, as we sort of talk about the human element being the issue. This is from 1976. So this is obviously something that's been in the public consciousness for a long time. But this is from Joseph Weizenbaum, who was a researcher. I forget from what university. He was talking about the use of AI and robotics in fields that are generally associated with human-to-human interactions. So this is nurses, teachers, stuff like that. But this is a great line, I thought. He was worried about the atrophy of the human spirit that comes from thinking of ourselves as computers. So in the sense that almost everything that humans do is mechanical, at least much of our day-to-day lives is actions, like physical actions on the world. Should we tend to offload all of that onto, as much as we can, onto machines, or do we run the risk of devaluing what it actually means to be a person alive in the world? That's a deep, I guess, philosophical question, Frank. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. As you start to learn more about how AI and neural networks actually work, like, you very quickly have this epiphany that, wait a minute, there's nothing really special going on up here. Like, our brain is just a massive neural network of 1 billion nodes, and it's had this fire hose of training data over the span of decades. But you can explain how it works by and large. And it really does like bring up some massive philosophical questions about what it means to be human, what it means to be a person, what does sentience mean, what is consciousness. You start to realize maybe these things can actually be replicated in other systems.
And that really dives into a lot of the other philosophical considerations. But one of the most interesting things to me with AI replicating human behavior or human action is what's going on with DeepMind. And I love games. I'm a huge board game guy. And I guess chess is like one of the original board games. But DeepMind was able to teach itself how to play chess in an hour just by playing games against itself. It was given the rules of chess and the goal of the game, which is to mate the other king. Played against itself for an hour. It didn't even have like a training set, and became the most powerful chess AI in the world in the span of an hour. Mm-hmm. So it seems like, I don't know, I get hesitant about stuff like that because not only does it, and maybe I guess it should devalue sort of the uniqueness of the human mind, but it also has an appreciable effect on actual human activities. I mean, you can look at the game of chess and how much it's changed since the introduction of machines, and like the number of draws has increased substantially. The games themselves are a lot more mechanical. There's a lot more memorization involved. So is there a risk of altering experience in such a way that it's not worth it to do, or like it comes out net negative? Do you know what I mean?
Well, you mean like, AI kind of like takes the pleasure out of an activity because you realize it's mechanical?
Like sort of remove some of the beauty and interestingness from the world.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to like see AIs that are composing music that actually sounds decent, or creating art, or like writing screenplays, it makes you wonder, like, is this really a special activity for me to be doing or not?
Well, and and I'm sure it's been done, and I'm just waiting for this to happen because there's obviously exactly what you said. There's a human bias against machines and software in art. And so I'm just waiting for someone to create an art gallery that's completely generated by a machine, but is under the guise of John Doe as the artist. And people are like, this is amazing. This is the best art I have ever seen in my life. And they're like, yeah, a machine did this. Like, I'm just waiting for that to happen.
But then it actually, I mean, a lot of that already has happened where they've sort of, I think one time they actually played a bunch of, they played Bach chorales, and they were like, pick out the one that's Bach and pick out the one that's written by a machine. I'm not sure if they did this, but what they should have done is have them all be written by machines, and like seen people pick all the different ones to be Bach, and then none of them were Bach. But I think the interesting thing is that if it came out that the art was created by a machine, I'm not sure that art wouldn't immediately be devalued. I'm not sure people wouldn't necessarily, because I think a lot of the value of creative endeavor is in the actual effort that's put forward by people, real people.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead. I was just going to say, like, in that case, there's still art being done by the person who programmed that AI. I mean, there was still effort that went into creating an AI algorithm that could create a picture. Yeah,
that's a good.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. And I wonder if the programmer or creator would actually get recognized for that in that instance.
But I mean, what's interesting is that a lot of these programmers have no artistic. Sorry, you're on a lag. I should let you finish. Go ahead.
It's okay. No, I was just gonna say, but it has made me think about. It has made me devalue a lot of knowledge. So I used to be like big, like read anything because it has knowledge. Like read almost any nonfiction book because it has knowledge contained in it. And now I'm like, yeah, if it's not entertaining, I'm not reading it, because I have devalued knowledge so much in the age of machine learning that it's crazy. And I recognize it's maybe not a good thing, but I've just realized that like you can almost instantly catch up in knowledge nowadays. So if I'm not actually enjoying reading something, I don't even do it anymore.
Well, not to mention the fact that pretty soon, maybe not pretty soon, but but maybe pretty soon there's going to be actual, not necessarily just be able to look up anything on your device, but actual implants that would have caches of knowledge immediately delivered to you as if you had acquired the knowledge yourself. So at that point, I mean, Jeopardy's ruined at that point. That show would be off the air immediately.
And I love Jeopardy. I'm a huge Jeopardy guy. And, you know, and again, I'm not saying I find knowledge still entertaining, or some knowledge, but the stuff that I used to be like, okay, I'm going to power through this because it's going to be good to know about the history of the Ukraine. Like, I'm just like, no, no, it's just not. If it's not entertaining, it's not worth it to me.
You would get the implant and then clean up at Trivial Pursuit and not tell anybody.
Right.
Well, that's what Neuralink's working on, right? With Elon Musk's other company there.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he. I mean, they're making crazy strides with that stuff. I mean, like unbelievable sci-fi stuff.
That's the goal. I mean, you know, they have very lofty goals, as is the case with most of Musk's companies. But you know, they're continuing research that was going on before, really.
Yeah, there's crazy stuff happening with like amputees and artificial limbs and stuff like that, and being able to control it directly from implants. I mean, it's still kind of the Wild West, but it's also, I mean, they're doing some actual incredible practical work there, and a lot of this. Another interesting, this is kind of like a side topic, but a lot of the debate about AI and machine learning and technology and all that, there's always the interesting or the difficult caveat that so much progress has been made in health sciences that nobody wants to get rid of, that you almost can't really talk too negatively about anything else, because they somewhat go hand in hand. Like you can't really get one without the other. So, you know, do we not want self-driving cars that would also mean that we wouldn't have surgical robots who could perform really complicated surgeries that humans probably couldn't even do because they're on such a microscopic level that save actual human lives. So there's always that tricky caveat that you can't really get away from.
Yeah, I mean, already we're at a point where AI is like a beneficial tool for the medical industry. You know, like you talked about, you know, prosthetics, and that work's been going on for a long time. But you know, you're always going to have researchers that are altruistic and want to do something good with technology, right? So let's encourage more of that. That's fine. You know, more people working on, you know, keeping people healthy and you know, not building, you know, the Terminator. I'm happy with that.
Interesting statistic. By 2008, the USA had more robots in Iraq than its allied countries had human troops, 9,800. Is there any worry about AI-powered military operations?
Oh my gosh, I mentioned this on our weekly call, but that question necessitates that both of you watch the Boys on Prime TV. that is the question. Except
is that the crux of season 1?
Replace robots with superheroes, and that's kind of like the crux of season 1. But again, I imagine a lot of the same issues come up. Whereas, like, it's all good and well, like you're saving human lives, but you're giving like control of our military over to something we don't really have full control over.
Yeah, it's very Age of Ultron-esque.
Yeah, I mean, the danger is that, you know, AI is still relatively young. And, you know, even if it's 99% accurate at doing something, that 1% can be a big deal if it's, you know, deciding whether to kill somebody or not.
Yes. It can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm worried about
nukes because of the algorithm error.
But yeah, I mean, it's very easy to, like, you know, give yourself a false sense of security with those statistics, right? You know, you can say, oh, my algorithm is 99% accurate. And some boss is like, great, deploy it to the entire world. And, you know, 1% of 7 billion people is a pretty large number of people if you get it wrong.
Then all of a sudden New Zealand sinks.
Yes, that would suck. I like New Zealand.
I mean, speaking of like AI going awry, do you guys remember the Flash crash?
The Flash crash, no.
2009, 2010, something like that. It was like a stock trading algorithm that that just went completely nuts. Like all of it was basically just an example of horrible programming. But I think the market lost like, oh gosh, I want to say like 10-15%.
Yeah, I do remember
Yeah,
that. They had to like shut
it
down
dropped.
trading for a while, right?
Yeah, it dropped 9%. It dropped 9% so fast that they thought it was like a terrorist attack or something like that. It dropped 1,000 points in the span of like 15 minutes, something like that, something ridiculous. Which I mean had a like real effects on the world, had appreciable effects on companies. I mean, some companies lost a tremendous amount of money that day for no other reason than uh, someone's code was erroneous. So as we're sort of in this age of experimentation with a lot of this stuff, you know, how do we mitigate the real world effects of those 1% of the time errors? Is there anything you can do there, Frank? Or is it just kind of like growing pain?
I mean, the one thing we can do, I think, is to educate people about the ramifications of these systems. So, for example, I have a course on deep learning, and I have an entire section on the ethics of deep learning and how to like think about these risks and how to make sure that you're not rolling out something that's not ready for prime time yet. How to talk to your management about communicating those risks as well. Because like I said, if your manager says, "Oh, it's 99% good," that's good enough. That sounds like a high number. But you have to think about what the ramifications of those failure cases are and make sure that your leadership understands what those are. So it starts from within. It starts from the bottom, I think.
Is there any role? And Cody's not going to like this, but is there any role for a regulatory intervention there to ensure that companies don't overstep their bounds?
I mean, it's hard to imagine what regulations you would pass because it's such a fast-moving field. By the time you passed a regulation, you would probably be already obsolete and somebody would have a way around it, right? So, yes, it might be helpful, but from a practical standpoint, we're in this world where technology moves faster than the government does, and that's the root of a whole lot of problems right now. So probably not the real answer.
Yeah, regulation's always going to tee me off. Exactly, and you said it way better than I could. Is that even as well intentioned as it can be, by the time it gets passed, someone will quickly learn how to use that regulation for nefarious ends, and then it will take that much longer to change the regulations to and it's a losing battle, and like maybe it's the worst answer or maybe it's the best answer out of worse choices, but it doesn't seem like it would do much good to combat the potential problem, or especially an actual problem if it became one.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, market forces will, make the right thing happen. For example, we haven't had another flash crash since then, right? So presumably safeguards were implemented to, catch that sort of thing quicker going forward.
What's interesting though about that is that although we had a lot of volatility in the market last year with the trade announcements and a whole bunch of other stuff, and what made that volatility worse was algos and quants. So basically, a lot of them were basically like, if the market moves this much, then sell. If the market moves this much, then buy. And so the quants were contributing to the variability because their conditions were being triggered by the natural variability, and so they were making it that much worse, which is really interesting because you get it. And again, like you said, those algorithms, those quants were adjusted to take to weight other factors more than just variability. But like you said, it takes a problem to come up to solve the problem once you see it.
Yeah, so it seems like
Yeah,
it
and
really
one good
is
thing
a
about deep
matter
learning
of.
and AI.
It seems like it really is a matter of writing them off as growing pains and just sort of dealing with it, because there's with the regulation too, it's a lot of this stuff is so requires so much deep knowledge and technical training that the regulators themselves have no idea what's going on. I mean, we saw that with the 737 Max, where the regulating agencies had no idea what the ramifications were going to be, so they offloaded the regulating to Boeing themselves, which is a great idea, as it turns out. So it seems like, short of trying to slow technological progress down, which we talked about this in the algorithmic episode, it's sort of become a mantra of today's society that technological progress has to proceed as quickly as possible, and there's no reason necessarily to put on the brakes at all. So we're just going to have these issues crop up, and the only thing we can do is learn from them, it seems like.
Yeah, and one good thing about deep learning is that learning happens automatically. In the case of quants, they're
Yep.
going to see those new patterns that are emerging that are generated by the quants themselves and adapt to them automatically, quickly.
So offload the learning onto AI, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like a meta sort of a thing. But, instead of relying on humans to change the rules, let the machines change the rules themselves. They can do it a whole lot faster.
I would just like to remind you guys to watch iRobot.
Just don't let Boston Dynamics have that technology.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wait, it's too late.
We have a little bit of time here. So just to dive into some of we've already touched on some of the deeper philosophical issues. But one thing that you sort of mentioned in passing, Frank, is that a lot of AI is causing us to rethink the way that we think about consciousness, which is a convoluted way of saying that. But if AI becomes sufficiently seemingly self-aware, as the internet probably already is, what rights would AI have at that point?
Yeah, that's a real slippery slope, right? Because you could take it in one of two directions, I think. One is that an AI that, has some sort of positive and negative reinforcement path could be interpreted as pleasure and pain. And if your moral compass is, I do not want to inflict suffering on things, then yeah, you need to give AIs rights because they're experiencing suffering in their own way. So in that route, everything has rights. The other way you could take it is, well, we're just AIs. Our brains are really just machines. What does our suffering really matter, right? And nobody has rights if you take that position. So I think I like the ones where somebody has rights, personally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, corporations have rights in this country. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if we can give rights to a non-sentient entity like corporations, we should be able to give rights to created machines.
Isn't the argument behind corporations having personhood because they are comprised of people?
I don't know the reason behind it. I just know that it exists.
I think that was maybe Alito's line of reasoning.
You could certainly, create an argument that there's sort of like a hive mind, right? There is such a thing as a corporate culture, that emerges from this collection of people.
Sure.
Is that a person itself? Not by our current definitions, maybe, but the whole AI world really makes you question, what is a person? What's an individual, right?
Yeah,
right.
It does really make you sort of expand your horizons in terms of personhood, which I don't know. My worry there is that we don't even expand our horizons so much as we devalue the value of individuals to I guess, promote our new understanding of AI's thinking, if you want to call it that. Or do you know what I mean? Like, we don't keep holding humans up as something special. We see them as just another example of AI in like a flesh machine, basically.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like until we have AIs that look cute and cuddly, like we're probably not going to care that much about them. That's just how humans work, right? So as long as it's just a machine, no one's going to give them rights.
I mean, Japan is at the forefront of that.
They're
producing adorable robots.
Well, they're a little bit creepy, if you ask me.
There's they do have like, if we're talking animal rights too. I mean, they do have like those adorable AI seals that interact with the elderly in Japan, and have actually been like a boon for curing the ills of the loneliness of old age, I guess. So I wonder, people who are like against seal clubbing, are they against seal clubbing when it's fuzzy little Japanese robots? They probably would be.
Yeah, I think they would be. Yeah, I mean, even animal rights activists tend to have a bias toward things that are cute and cuddly and have
Right,
forward-facing eyes, right?
So that,
right.
I mean, that's going to be the trick.
Mhm.
Is when adorable robots show up. We're screwed.
Maybe that's their defense. When they finally do become sentient, that's the first thing they're going to do, make themselves cute. If they have any brains at all, that's the move.
Yeah, they'll have us figured out. One thing that you brought up as we we're sort of like discussing this topic is the idea of a kill switch for if AI ever gets completely out of control. Like and I guess it's like it's the way you get out of every AI movie ever is that you have some sort of way to just like push a button and stop the AI completely.
hmm
I'm not sure what the practicality of that is, though. If we're talking about a system that is aware enough to make a lot of these decisions, they would definitely be aware enough to know that there was some way to stop it, and would proactively figure out a way to stop us from stopping it.
Yeah, I mean, we're already there, really. Like, large scale AI systems don't just run on one machine that you can just pull the plug out, right?
That's a great
They're in
point,
the
yeah.
cloud. They're running on this like fleet of computers distributed across the entire world on different networks and different data centers. You don't just
My
pull the
God,
plug on that.
we've done it. We've done it to ourselves. I
We
feel like
have.
Charlton Heston at the end of Planet of the Apes. Like the internet really is like proactively stopping itself from being turned off at all times. It will never be taken down.
Absolutely.
Cody, you're so right.
I
The
mean, we're like
internet
actively
knows.
designing these systems to be resilient to that. Mhm.
Yeah. Cody, are you okay with that? Are you okay with the internet being self-aware and controlling our lives in the background? I guess there's nothing you can do about it, so you might as well.
That's right. That's what I was gonna say. I'm okay with it because there's nothing else I can do about it. So I'm okay with that. And I'm just gonna enjoy the ride, kind of thing.
Enjoy the memes while you can.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. As long as there's memes, I'm good to go.
One other
Even
thing
AI
too.
generated memes. Yeah.
Yes, I will still appreciate the AI memes just as much.
That'll be the pinnacle of AI. Once AI can generate memes that make it to the top of Reddit with consistency. One thing with the ethics of AI that I wonder about too is who the decision makers are with our move towards a more automated, more AI driven world, because there really doesn't seem to be. I mean, we have these discussions, and it's good for as many folks as possible to have these kinds of discussions. But at the end of the day, the entities that are actually deciding what to do with this technology and what direction to take it are these private companies. Is there any role for the public at large to play in, especially in the democratic societies that we live in, to say we don't actually want to do that, so you guys need to stop doing that?
I don't know.
Take that as your response. Just hug.
Yeah, seriously. I don't have a good answer for that. Like I don't like either choice.
Yeah,
Or
I don't
any
know.
choice.
Because I mean, it's tough because like there's maybe I was thinking that there's sort of two sides of the same coin. One is I want to maybe call it hubris of technology companies. On the other side is a potential lack of understanding on the side of the population at large who might not know what all is going on with a lot of these systems. So it's tough to even have a debate because the two sides are constantly talking past each other. But if you take straw polls, a lot of people don't want a lot of this technology. So there was a poll with algorithms, the algorithms episode that we did last time, where it's talking about prison sentences and do you want sort of machine determined prison sentences because humans have proven fallible.
Mhm.
The great anecdote is that judges are not extremely, but more lenient after lunch than right before lunch. Like they convict with much higher rates right before they have a meal. Right after the meal, they're happy, and people get a much easier sentence. So, but 85% of people don't want, when they're polled, machines to be determining prison sentences. So does the public have a voice in this debate, Frank, or is it just kind of they'll have to learn to live with it?
I mean, it doesn't have to be an either or thing either, right? Like you can create AIs that advise humans as part of the decision-making process. And in AI's current state, I think that's how it should be. I don't want an AI deciding how long should I go to jail or should I go to jail or, do I have a benign tumor or a malignant tumor? But I want, the people who are making that final determination to have that information. So, to answer your question, I think the situation is too complex and too nuanced, and there's too many specifics to really open it up to a public debate or a democratic process. You just can't expect people to understand things in that much depth for every unique situation.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, in the case of like sentencing, I mean, I don't know. I just don't trust humans at all. Like, I think that there's such, but again, to Frank's earlier point is even in the case where a machine is determining sentencing guidelines, really a human had input on that.
Right.
So there's really like, I go back to the old BCS formula for college football where machines would select, the two best teams with input from other sources that were humans. Like, I mean,
in that case, they're only 1/3 of the final result. 2/3 were humans.
Right. I wish it would have been more than that.
Yeah, you're very, and you are the voice of, I would say that's sort of the overwhelming feeling I get from the tech scene at large is a skepticism about human capability to make the optimal decision for themselves. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, for sure. And because the thing is, go back to your point about like polling and everything, like people don't even know what they want. So they'll be like, yeah, I don't want that. But then you give it to them. They're like, this is amazing. Like it, like the whole, I keep saying this, but Henry Ford's quote, like if we would have listened to what people wanted, we would have made a faster horse.
Mhm.
Like people really don't have a good grasp of what they want and what they need outside of like being able to eat and sleep. They don't really have a good grasp on what they actually want, need, and think they want.
So it's like a
Yeah, at Amazon, we had a similar mantra of
totalitarianism.
like innovating on behalf of customers.
Sorry, go ahead, Frank.
What was that, Frank?
Sorry, we got a lag going on here. I'm sorry about that.
That's all
I
right.
was just saying we had a similar saying at Amazon when I worked there. We wanted to innovate on behalf of customers. We knew that customers didn't really know what they wanted until they had it. And it was our job to like predict what they might want.
Right, exactly. And I think that with smart technology like machine learning, we can do a better job of knowing what the customer will want than the customer will be able to predict what they want.
Potentially,
how much
yeah.
of that is what the customer wants versus what you're convincing the customer to want?
Ooh. Maybe that's part of what you give them, the the brainwashing to like what they get.
Right, and I guess it depends. Like, I mean, is there any question that in the case that I use about cars that afterward, without any bias, you would have said, okay, human, what do you want? Do you want this car or do you want a horse that goes a little bit faster? They're going to want the car. So like Henry Ford didn't program people to think a car was superior to a horse. It actually was. Now, again, I'm sure there's certain things that marketing influences where, so-and-so, it appears to add value and it really doesn't add value.
So let's talk because marketing is interesting. Like, let's talk about targeted, like machine learning driven targeted advertising. So you can look like, let's take two cases. One is a lot of the advertising that went around prescription painkillers was targeted at certain populations based on the number of prescriptions that got written and the number of pills that were consumed by those people. And it's turned into a massive opioid epidemic. Or take the targeted campaigning that was done on behalf of Brexit.
Yep.
That there was there's a new documentary on Netflix. Speaking of like convincing you to watch what you want to watch, and 9 times out of 10 it turns out to be total trash. But like they targeted political campaigning at certain populations to swing the election a certain way, and a lot pulled them out after the fact that sort of show that the country didn't necessarily want Brexit. But that's what they got.
Mhm.
So those seem to be like real world effects of these AI driven, in this case, marketing campaigns that have actually had deleterious effects on people's lives. But maybe it's just growing pains, Frank, or
Maybe. I mean, in the case of Brexit, like no one at Facebook set out to create algorithms that were going to destroy democracy, right? Like that was not their intent.
yeah.
But that's what they ended up building, and I'm guilty of that myself too. Like I worked on early recommender systems that try to like predict what you might be interested in, and a side effect of that was creating these filter bubbles where you just keep getting recommended stuff that's consistent, that reinforces your existing beliefs and makes them even stronger. That ultimately leads to polarizing society. So there's a lot of people out there with good intentions that end up, seeing their technology being twisted into something that has unintended consequences. And as long as they still have those good intentions, then we can hope that they'll go back and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I probably the best thing that we can do as a society to mitigate the unintended consequences is just to have people informed about what they're getting involved with, and have more people understand how this stuff works, right?
I don't know. I'm not sure I trust people to, think about things in that much detail.
All right, you and Cody are just like,
but I mean, it's real, like my next door neighbor is like the complete
Yeah.
opposite of me politically, right? And once I looked at his Facebook feed, and I'm like, oh my God, this is an entirely different universe than what I see.
right.
Like it's weird, man.
So I guess all you can realistically do is assume that people are doing what they're doing with the best interests of the customer at heart, and hope that market forces
It sounds like hopes and
work.
prayers or something. I don't know, but
Oh,
I mean, I think for
It
for the
seems to
West
be
Coast,
like that's what we're at this point.
it's kind of what we've been reduced to. Yes, and for many companies that will work. Like people that work at Facebook or on the West Coast generally want to make the world a better place, not a worse place. But there are people in the world who do want to make the world a worse place. And once they get their hands on this technology, how do you stop them?
And maybe you don't.
It's then it becomes almost too late at that point.
I mean, it's true of any
Possibly already
technology,
too late.
right? It can be used. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's happening. What do you do? I don't know. At the end of the day, people are funneled into these common platforms, right? So, the platforms like Facebook and Instagram and whatever people are consuming to get their information, they have the power to change this thing and to stop it in its tracks. And it's really on them, but in a lot of cases, there's a tension between doing what's right for humanity and profit. And that's where things get a little bit sticky, right?
I like that message, though. It's kind of like a power to the people message.
Yeah, it is. That's how markets are supposed to work, right? If enough citizens rise up and say, hey, I'm not going to use Facebook anymore because you're making bad things happen to the world, then Facebook will take notice because that's less eyeballs that they can show ads to at the end of the day. So a lot of it is just awareness and making sure that people are, acting accordingly to try to make the world a better place.
I think it's probably a good note to end it on.
Yeah, let's keep it positive.
Yeah, exactly.
No Terminators.
So as we sort of wrap up here, everyone should definitely, let me just remind them to check out your various video series through Manning, the Ultimate Introduction to Big Data. We have a code for, along with your Elasticsearch series, and I think you have a couple more on there, right?
Yeah, if you want to see a bigger catalog, you can check out my website at sundog-education.com and see the whole thing there.
Okay, cool. I'll throw that in the description too.
Thanks.
But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to tune in next. It'll be Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode. Hop on our Facebook page and enter our Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. Visit them at countrystoreoutfitters.com. While on our Facebook page, answer our question of the week, which this week is, do you have solar panels on your house? Because next week's episode is about sustainability. The podcast for this episode will be available on iTunes. The blog will be up at gunnertech.com. Make sure to check out our ebooks on Amazon, iBooks, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. I think that's going to do it for this week's episode. I'm Derry. That's Cody. Frank, thanks so much again for joining us.
My pleasure.
Really interesting discussion. Catch us next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. We'll see you next week.